Three, two, one. Welcome back to the Human Sexuality Podcast. I'm Lee,
And I'm Peyton.
and for our third podcast assignment, we are going to be interviewing somebody, and that special guest is my wife, Abby.
Hello.
So we're going to be asking you some questions, very basic, very easy. Um, and we're going to start with the first one. Where are you from?
I am from a small town in southeastern Georgia called Albany.
Okay, is that close to Atlanta?
It's about 3 hours away.
Okay, well, no, not really, but it's about
No, not
basically the only
really.
city that anyone in Georgia knows. Um,
Did your school have any sexual education classes?
Yes.
So, like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your education on that topic? Like, one being absolutely worst program I was ever involved with, or 10, hey, I learned a lot and this was actually beneficial.
Well, I myself didn't take the classes. I had friends that did, but because of my parents' religious beliefs, they opted me out of it.
Oh,
so it
wow.
wasn't mandatory.
No, it wasn't mandatory.
Okay. So what grades were these in?
So we had health in seventh and eighth, and then we had sexual education ninth through 12th, and you only had to take it once, but you could pick the year.
Only in high school, or like you had an option to take one of either health or sex ed?
Most students took both, so you could either take health in seventh or eighth, but you were supposed to take it, and then sex ed you took once, but you got to pick what grade you took it in.
Okay. And you opted out.
Yeah, my parents opted me out.
Okay. Okay. So do you know what was taught in these classes?
Yeah, so seventh and eighth, the health class was mostly about puberty, honestly, like coming to age stuff, and anatomy, and abstinence was pushed a lot in seventh and eighth. And then ninth through 12th was just about safe sex. So, just preventative measures against pregnancy and STDs.
Well, going back to Peyton's question, do you think that your peers got a good education in that stuff, or
I think so, yeah. Like the classes seemed, from what everybody talked about, like they seemed very beneficial. I think they could have been taken further, but kind of in the South, they don't quite get as in depth as other places.
How do you feel about that decision for them to opt you out of that?
I remember I was very upset about it. And I was pretty angry because I felt like, if it's my body and in general, just something that I'm gonna partake in one day, like I should know what I'm doing. And I kind of felt like they just decided I didn't need to.
Yeah, that does sound like a conflicting interest.
Yeah, a little bit. You would think that would have been my choice, like they would have been like, well, do you want to take the class so you can at least learn about it? But they didn't even ask me. They just immediately like signed the waiver that was like, no, I don't want my child to be in it.
so how did you go about learning this stuff?
Most of mine was Google, curiosity, and then my friends just talking about cool or weird stuff they learned in class. They'd be like, "Oh, we talked about this," and I would ask questions.
You got to learn somehow,
Yeah.
So yeah, it's good.
So you don't feel
Uh,
like you were left behind in that aspect because you were still able to learn things?
Yeah, I would say I learned later than everybody else, which I mean, that happened for a lot of my stuff because I grew up very religious and very sheltered. So everything I learned, I was learning on my own. And so it would be like months to sometimes even years after my peers were learning it.
well, you did learn it though, so that is good.
Yes.
Yeah. So um, so you said that they had like you wish that they would have expanded on more for more people to learn. What do you wish they would have taught more?
Well, because it was southeastern Georgia, a lot of it was abstinence and a lot of it was more of don't get pregnant than it was STDs. So I kind of wish that they would have talked more about STDs and I wish they would have been LGBT included, like gay sex and those STD rates or just like how to do things, like growing up LGBT in the South is like really hard because you just don't talk about those things.
I haven't heard, not to interrupt, but I haven't
No.
heard you mention them talk about consent one time. And I know that you weren't in the class, but do you think that they ever dove into that?
Well, personally, at my school, consent was a big issue. We actually had the police department come and talk to us like in the gymnasium because we had an incident regarding consent not being taught and things went very bad and ended us up like us being spoken to about consent by like legal people.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
it sounds like
Wow.
they got a better education than we did in Mississippi because they didn't even talk about that.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, I can't really, I don't really have a perspective similar to y'all's because I was homeschooled and I didn't really have that sit down talk with anybody. So I kind of learned everything on my own. So this is really interesting to see like all the different ways that they treat it.
Yeah, it's really interesting too because like one of my best friends, she's from New York and to learn about hers, like they had demonstration, they talked about everything from puberty and consent to different forms of birth control and they were like taught how to, use condoms and initiate and ask for consent and they were like really in depth about it. And down here, like we don't even scrape the iceberg on that type of thing.
Yeah. I mean, parents teach their kids how to drive cars, but it doesn't seem like a lot of them are comfortable with teaching their kids how to have a healthy sexual relationship throughout your life.
Right.
Seems like there's something's a little more important than driving.
Yeah.
so I think that goes into like our next series of questions. So for you, is sex a taboo topic?
For me personally, no, I don't mind talking about it. Like in my friend groups, it's not, but definitely like in the communities and regions I grew up in, it's very taboo. And I would definitely say in my immediate family, it's something that you just don't talk about.
Why do you feel that
Fear.
is?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's almost as though people are, I don't want to say disgusted, but kind of disgusted by like their body and what they do with it. Almost as if they're ashamed or it's just supposed to be like a private, deep thing.
What do you think informed your opinion to be different about this topic than those other people's perspective?
Honestly, I think a big part of it was growing up and getting out of that like sheltered environment and kind of learning more. And you kind of just see like this is normal, this is natural, like everybody's doing it. You see like how to do it, how not to like go about and asking, for consent and things like that. And just I feel the more educated you are, the less taboo it becomes.
Yeah, we're scared of what we don't understand.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that.
Do you think the religious aspect of your community also aided and abetted in that?
Oh my goodness, yes. Um, just insanely. It was something you didn't ask questions about. We didn't even like my parents didn't talk to me about menstruation beforehand, and I didn't take that class. So I remember being so freaked out when, that time came for me as a young woman. And all my dad could say was, well, it's your fault because Eve sinned. So just deal with it. Like, here's what you need. Like, get out of my face. And
Wow,
so,
that
like, yeah. And so when you see like that in terms of something as simple as menstruation, like when it comes to like bigger areas like sex or consent or anything like that, like you would see why they wouldn't talk about it.
wow, it just seems so much easier to just explain what's going on.
Right. It
It's
so
simple.
is. And just, yeah, no, not to them.
This is going down to our last written question. Of course, we've asked you a few more off the books. Um, so do you think sex education class should be mandatory?
Yes. I think that that's something that everybody would benefit from. I think that particularly like where we are with teen pregnancy rates and teen STD rates and everything, like I just feel like being informed would make a lot of these issues go away or the tabooness go away.
What about uh what about people having access to sex therapists? How do you
Do,
feel
do you want
about
to do you want to expand upon what a sex therapist is and does?
Oh, yeah, I can do that. So, a sex therapist is someone who usually helps with intimacy issues between couples or even just people who experience issues regarding sexual, uh, pretty much anything that could go wrong with sex or just how to have a healthy one. you sit down and talk through issues regarding that.
Be like couples counseling, but for
But for
just sex.
sexual issues,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. I do think that that's a resource that should be talked a bit more. I literally like looked at Lee and mouth, like, what is that? Because I did not know that that was a field in therapy that you could go to. That's really cool. And I do think that that should be a resource that people have, and I just feel like it would be more resourceful and helpful. I mean, even as something as simple as like my best friend is asexual, and growing up like that wasn't talked about, like her partners like thought that that was weird, or like she often wasn't dated because of like that view. And if she would have had that growing up, like I think she'd be a lot more like confident in her sexuality and not have let things like that get to her the way that it did growing up.
I think even it just being more,
Like informed.
yeah, more people knowing about it could be helpful. I've
Yeah.
always had this theory that a reason why so many marriages don't work is because of the abstinence nature of sex ed in America and how we talk about it as a society.
Yeah. And the fact that you have to wait until marriage, like
Yeah.
what happens if you find out you're not sexually compatible with someone after you've already married them? Like that leads to problems later and
And
sometimes divorce, and
and that's why I think sex therapy could be really beneficial to those people. And a lot of them don't even know that this,
is an option or like
yeah.
a thing. Yeah.
Yeah, there's actually some really good YouTube channels with people who work in the industry. And if you watch those videos, it's almost calming because they explain to you like why these things, like why you may feel issues with being touched in certain areas or having insecurities around certain things. And they just help you, like they give you tools to manage those issues so that you can be more fulfilled whatever way you want to be.
That's really cool. Yeah, I wish a lot more people knew that. I can think of some people that would really benefit from
Yeah.
that being like a resource. Yeah.
And you don't even have to be involved with someone. Like you can just go as like a single
A
person
person.
and
Yeah.
just like, hey, I want to work on this.
All right. So I think that's all we have time for today, or at least all the questions we have left. Thank Abby. Thank you
Yeah.
for being here, volunteering to be a part of this interview. Of course, want to thank the co-host who's been here this whole time, Peyton. Yes, and we want to thank all the other people in our group. I wanna thank Lydia, Anna, Callie, and Madeline. And thank you, Dr. Carrasco, for listening to this.